Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's program honoring Master and Swamiji having their first meeting 72 years ago. So it has been a long time since the birth of that very, very important event and the profound effect that it's had on the lives of all of us.
We're so glad you can join us this evening or whatever time it is for you, wherever you may be watching. And this is a time it was a moment of great blessings, and those blessings are still like a beautiful star that shines perpetually. The blessings of that moment when Swami was accepted by Master as his disciple are still there for us to receive. So let's try to go deep and receive those blessings this evening. So we'll begin now with a prayer.
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great Masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow to you all. Bless us with the great magnetism, the love and joy that you shared with each other. Bless us also, that we may be deep and true disciples, aligning our energies with thy great will and thy great expression of God's consciousness. We are thine, ever thine. Be thou ours. Om. Peace. Amen.
Let's next listen to and enjoy some of Swami's beautiful music performed by Bhagavati and Ramesha.
Dare to be different, dare to be free, dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air, be strong in your courage when others despair. Never in anger, never in haste, go without pride, be never abased. Freedom is yours if freedom you'll give, to all give it freely, in freedom you'll live. Mountains that stand up tall to the sky, tell us no dream it is ever too high. Dare to climb boldly, brave that high peak, you'll never know failure if bravely you seek. Dare to be different, dare to be free, dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air, be strong in your courage when others despair. Be strong in your courage when others despair. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach all men how to spin clouds of bloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at our rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms, all fade. Joy must sing in the night, to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love.
Thank you, Ramesh and Bhagavati. Such beautiful music Swamiji wrote, and that was beautifully channeled. Let's meditate together just briefly. In this meditation, bring your energy inside, into the deep spine, and feel that there's a flow of energy coming up the spine to the spiritual eye. And visualize there the meeting of Swami and of Master on that fateful day 72 years ago, where Master expressed as his first words, "I want to be your disciple," and Master's acceptance of him. And try with the deep concentration of your mind to actually feel that you are there in the room, so that you are blessed also by that connection of discipleship. We'll meditate just briefly, 2 or 3 minutes. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Again, welcome. We're here to celebrate Swami's spiritual anniversary. Obviously, the day that he met Master. He met Master sometime in the early afternoon of September 19th. 12th, excuse me, of course, 12th. And then proceeded right then to go and move into the ashram at Mount Washington. And so it was a very, very fast transition. A few days before that, imagine we're now on Saturday, so imagine Tuesday or Wednesday, he had finished reading the autobiography of a yogi for the first time. He got on a bus, came, met Master, and moved into the ashram. All of that happened very quickly within a week. And isn't that the way that the divine works? You know, there's a certain pattern to the flow of the divine energy. Master met his master, Sri Yukteswar, in what seems to be a miraculous way. You know, he had been looking, he had seen him in vision, then he came and saw him at the end of this narrow little lane and met him for the first time. And we tend to think, well, that must have been such a important moment. It must have been big and grand. But it wasn't necessarily big and grand in its outward form. Narrow little lane, 2 people meeting. Master wasn't with Sri Yukteswar living in the ashram all that long, nor of course was Swami in the ashram at Mount Washington living all that long with Master. He of course lived some years after that, there at Mount Washington and then in India before the separation happened. But we tend to think of these events, because we know them so well, as being big and grand on an outward sense, but they aren't. They're relatively scaled down to human size and a human drama. And so if we look at things from the outside, we don't see the real essence of it. If we look at the meeting of Swami and Master, and then all of the extraordinarily magnificent things that Swami did in his life, if we look at the outside, we don't see the real essence of what's happening. But what is really happening is that God's will is flowing through these various channels. In a certain sense, around Christmas time, you see a Christmas tree with all the gorgeous Christmas lights, multicolored and perhaps blinking. And I've heard many people say, "Oh, what a beautiful Christmas tree. Oh, what wonderful lights there are in that Christmas tree." I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, "Oh, what a marvelous miracle the electricity is flowing through the wires that allows all of that to happen." Because God keeps the essence of things relatively hidden. But if we look at the movement of discipleship, one might say, it goes way back. Babaji told Sri Yukteswar that I'm going to be in the future sending you a disciple, and your job is to train him so that he can carry out his mission to the West. And so it was preordained far before Master ever met Sri Yukteswar. In fact, far before Master was born in this incarnation, it was preordained. It was preordained that Swamiji meet Master on this day, long before he actually read the autobiography and took that bus trip and met Master. And it's preordained in a certain sense that you and I are connected to this line, because the roots of our discipleship, the roots of Swami's discipleship, the roots of the flow of divine energy through these lineages goes way back into many, many past incarnations. But let's come, because we're obviously celebrating the discipleship in this life and the expression of that discipleship, the expression of that in this life of Swamiji and Master. Let's come back to that beautiful, fateful day, a Sunday afternoon, September 12th, 1948, when Swamiji met Master and began in this life, renewed that connection that allowed that power of the divine to flow. And Swami's done so many magnificent things. We heard 3 of his songs. As we know, there are 450 some songs. There are 150 books. There are the communities, the thousands and thousands of lectures and classes that Swamiji gave. All of the friendships and connections that he made. We tend to look at the outer flow of that and say how wonderful, just as we should. We should look at a Christmas tree and say how beautiful the lights are. But as yogis, we need to also recognize that the lights are simply the expression. Swami's life is simply the expression of discipleship. And so the only way to really understand that moment of connection and the first words out of Swami's mouth, "I want to be your disciple." Those were the very first words he ever spoke to Master. And so that set the pattern of his life, and it has in fact, set the pattern of the lives of all of us. And it's a glorious drama that is going on. Here we find ourselves 72 years after that meeting, 100 years after Master's coming to America. We find ourselves in the midst of world chaos, pandemic. Here from Ananda village, the pollution is so high from all of the fires that are scorching the west coast. The pollution is so high that it's hazardous to go outside of your house. Not so great to stay inside your house. It's hazardous to breathe right now. But it's as if Master and Babaji and the great ones know what is happening. They know these things are coming. They know these times are on us. And they have been preparing as much as they can possibly prepare a way of working our way through all of that exterior chaos. And if we get caught up in the externals of what's going on, we won't find our way through. If we stay with the essence will guide us through. That was the message of Swamiji's life. He defined his life by discipleship. If we define our lives by discipleship, we will be led through whatever dramas come our way, because that discipleship will strengthen us and prepare us and help us with grace to go through whatever we need to go through. For Swamiji, he also had his trials. And one time, I don't want to steal a line from Devi, maybe she was going to use it, so I'm going to steal it anyway. But she was asking Swamiji, she said, I don't know if I can go through what we're having to go through. And Swamiji said, didn't know that I could either. But faith is my armor. That's the title of her book. Faith is my armor. So faith, discipleship, attunement, that is our armor for going through hard times. But let's not talk about the preparation for the negative. Let's talk more and more importantly about how faith and discipleship prepares us to be channels for the divine to continue to spread outwardly. And so the more deeply we attune ourselves with Master and with God, and now with Swamiji, the more powerfully that energy can flow. In this sense, using another visual analogy, imagine a pipe with water coming out like a fire hose, fire hydrant, I should say. And we're a hose. And if our hose is off to the side, maybe we get a little trickle of that stream of water. The more we align our hose, the nozzle of our hose, with that stream, the more it empowers, comes through whatever channel we are. And that was the secret of Swamiji and Master. He defined his life by his attunement with Master, his discipleship, and therefore the power of the divine flowed powerfully through him and produced all of these exterior beautiful lights of song and music and communities and everything that Swamiji did. But it was always the act of discipleship. If Master had told him Master told him, your life is writing, editing, and lecturing. And Swamiji said, well, I don't really want to lecture, Master. And Master said, you'd better get used to it. That's what you have to do. It wasn't like Master was going to cut him a lot of slack, because Master, of course, knew that Swami's power came from the divine, that alignment with that divine was what was going to empower his life, just as it does for you and me. And so he was keeping Swamiji aligned. But if Master had said, your life is to be a hermit, and I don't want you lecturing, Swami would never have given a single lecture. If he said, I don't want you writing books, Swami wouldn't have written books. If he'd given Swami some other task, if he'd told Swami to go to the Himalayas and meditate, Swami would have clicked his heels 3 times and gone home like Dorothy back to Kansas, because that's the deeper aspect of Swamiji. His life was about the divine and seeking the divine. But that wasn't the mission in this life. Master had a world work to do. Master came in order to prepare the world for the new age, and we're living in part of that new age. Part of the reason for the fires on the West Coast and the disruption in politics and the all of the fracturing and chaos that we see in the world around us is because the old age of Kali Yuga is still trying to hold on to the changes that Dwapara Yuga is demanding. And so Master and Swamiji were beings of Dwapara Yuga, and they came with the teachings that we need for Dwapara Yuga. And so if we align ourselves with that great attunement that they demonstrated for us, then we will be in alignment. And as I said, Master came not just to gather a few disciples. He came with a world mission, a preordained world mission in this lifetime to give the teachings, the techniques, the attitudes, the empowerment for how to live properly as we move into Dwapara Yuga. And Swamiji, preordained from many lifetimes with Master before, he came to help complete that mission. Imagine a stone dropped in a lake. So Master is that first stone. And the wave of that first movement spreads out. And so it spreads out in a circle, and let's say that it covers that much. Well, then the lifetime of that first wave ends. And what happens then? If there's nothing else, then it doesn't continue. But if there's disciples attuned, then that wave can continue. And so Swami spread that wave out another. Now that circle is getting bigger and bigger. And if we all live our lives in attunement and in discipleship, then that wave will spread and spread and spread until it spreads all over the earth, just as it's destined to do, as it's always been destined to do. But the importance of this day is that Swamiji made that connection that allows that will of God to continue to spread out into the world. And because of who he was, because of his long previous lives of attunement with Master, he got his channel perfectly aligned to that, so that great power flowed through him. Great magnetism, great potential to help move and change the world. And your job, my job, your blessing, my blessing, is to align our individual consciousness with that great power. And if we do, then the divine will flow through us. The divine knows what it's doing much better than we know what we're doing. After all, we are the divine, we just don't know it. So the divine is the divine, but it knows it. We're the divine, we don't know it. So if we align with the divine consciousness that is our potential, then it will direct us and guide us and bless us. As Master said, the channel is blessed by what flows through it. So it will bless us as we do whatever we were meant to do. And so, above all, Swamiji gave us a model of discipleship and a model of deep, lifelong attunement with every ounce of body, mind, and soul that he had. He gave us that example. And I thank you again and again. I'm deeply grateful for what you have given me personally, Swamiji, and all of us.
Thank you, Jyotish. That was beautiful. And I wasn't going to use that line that you quoted me from, but I am going to charge royalty, so we'll talk about that later. Well, the rest of our time together this evening in celebrating Swami's 72nd spiritual anniversary, I'll share a few thoughts with you. And then we have some lovely videos. One that you saw a little unexpected clip of, where we'll be launching a new book this evening that we'll speak about later, written by Miriam Rogers, who had been Swamiji's nurse and for the last years of his life. And then we'll be seeing a video that Dave Bingham made about the life of Swami, both very inspiring. And then we'll end with a visualization. So I'd like to share some thoughts about, and it's a great honor really to talk about Swami on this day. He said in one of his writings, that he wrote in one of his books, I should say, that the way he felt best to be a channel for God was through the medium of friendship. And he realized that was less intimidating than an authority figure or an aloof yogi that never related to people. When we spend a lot of time in India annually. Unfortunately, this year we haven't been able to go because of the pandemic. But one of the things we hear so much in India, not just about us, but all of Ananda teachers, and we're just reflections of Swamiji, they said, you all are so accessible. Usually spiritual teachers they don't talk to people, they'll come and give a discourse and then leave, and they won't get to know you as people. But they said, Ananda is so different. Well, that's a reflection of Swamiji. And it's also a reflection of how Master worked with his disciples. I'd like to read for you, and with you, a beautiful, just brief excerpt from an article Swamiji wrote called Why I Love My Guru. And it says, Swami wrote, in all my dealings with Master in the body, I always knew he was on my side, not against anyone or anything, but supportive of me in all my struggles toward perfection. He responded supportively to my least thought. If I was wrong, he said it in such a way that only I, if others were present, could know what he was talking about. He never blurted out anything. All his words were carefully measured so as to be understandable and acceptable to me as possible. I love my Guru, as he himself wrote about his own Guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, as the spoken voice of silent God. He was ever, and now more than ever, my nearest, dearest companion. If I am right, I feel his inner smile. If I am wrong, I feel his inner encouragement to do better. He is on my side in every struggle against illusion. Could anyone be a better, truer friend than that? And that's the kind of friend that Swami was to all of us. There were so many times, both in our life and in the lives of people we knew, where there would be maybe a disagreement between people, and it could have gone into animosity. But Swami was never there to take sides. You always knew, as he wrote of Master, that he was on your side, but you knew he was on everybody's side. And it was so much better than, like when you're a child and maybe you get in an argument with children at school and you come home and you say, Mommy, so-and-so did this to me, and your mother gets on your side and she said, oh, that terrible little child, I'm going to call up their mother. And what happens? You feel protected, you feel loved, but also your sense of separate ego is getting affirmed. But with the divine friendship, with the expression of Divine Mother in this way, they don't take sides. They say, I'm sorry that this happened, but they also see the other person's point of view and what motivated them. And just as Master says in Autobiography of a Yogi, divine vision is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. So the kind of divine friendship that Swami offered us, which he had in turn learned from his guru, was, I know exactly what you're going through. I know your successes, I know your failures, I know your aspirations, and I am there to help you and support you. I had an interesting dream just a few nights ago and about Swami, and I'll share it because it didn't feel personal. It wasn't like a personal message to me, but I thought that it was really for all of us. And in the dream, it was some time of societal upheaval. It was chaotic. I didn't know where it was exactly, but people were being evacuated and so forth. And there was a young girl that I didn't know, maybe about 7 or 8 years old. And she was separated from her parents, and she was crying, and she was alone. And I took her, and I said, will you come with us, and we'll look after you. And then in the dream, some time passed. I don't know how much, but it seemed like it wasn't a matter of days, but maybe months. And we had grown quite fond of this little girl and embraced her as our daughter. And it was very loving. And then somehow her parents found out where she was and very much wanted to take her back. And they came and got her. And the little girl didn't even acknowledge us. She just went away. She was happy to see her parents. But I felt a little hurt in my heart that, gosh, we shared this special time together. And then a little while after that, Swami came. And it was a satsang. And there were many people there, but he just looked at me and he said, that hurt your heart, didn't it, when that little girl didn't acknowledge your love? And nothing changed. I never saw the little girl again. She never wrote. And, it wasn't like, I'll fix it for you, the way human love tries to do. But just knowing that he understood, my heart was healed. And I share that dream with you because that's the nature of the true divine friendship that Swami learned from Master, gave to us, was that, and I encourage you, whatever little hurts you have in your heart, maybe they're from childhood, maybe they're from long ago, maybe somebody said something unkind to you yesterday, whatever it may be, realize that your divine friend is seeing them. And in this dream, that divine friend was Swamiji. But it could be Master, it could be Divine Mother, it could be Jesus or one of our line of masters, or simply the formless divine consciousness. But remember, just as I realized in that dream, share everything in that divine friendship, because you are understood, whether it feels like it or not. You are observed, that's what in the dream, that was the message I got, that the divine knows every little hurt. Even this wasn't a big deal, but it healed it. And so that divine friendship that the great ones bring to us, it's the greatest gift of our life. And as Jyotish was saying, the most important aspect of Swamiji's life was his discipleship. Why? Why would you say that? And because we need to understand what discipleship really is. It isn't following an organization or doing this or doing that or this is your life's mission. Discipleship is the movement of the ego from the little self with divine guidance from a preordained guide, the guru, lifting that ego up and offering it into the infinite. That's the essence of discipleship. Not to get waylaid by this theory or this political situation or that. Not to delve into other spiritual paths, because it's really interiorizing and uplifting and focusing. And that's what Swami did his whole life. His whole life. It was that uplifted energy of the individual self, moving it towards the universal self. And that's why that divine friendship cannot be supportive of one and not the other. You've heard me say this before. Once I was wanting more personal energy from Swami. I was feeling I hadn't connected with him much. And he just looked at me and he said, "No one is special to me." I didn't say a word, but he knew. He looked at me and he said, "No one is special to me. I'm not even special to myself. Get with it, kid." You know, he didn't say that, but that's what he was saying. And again, it takes time to adjust. It takes time to raise our consciousness because we're used to human friendship that's on our side and not on the other side. But that divine friendship that is on everyone's side. And even when we make a mistake, not to realize that it's not like we get a black mark against us. They see that it's all, and the great ones see that it's all a movement. And every mistake they make, if we learn from it, if we see, oh, that was out of tune. Okay, we won't go that way anymore. They cheer us on. They say, oh, how wonderful, you're learning. You're learning. And Swami was always there. I can't tell you the number of times that people erred or spoke against him or things like that. And then if they would come back sincerely humble and apologetic, he would embrace them with open arms. Because that's what Master did. And we need to understand, it says in the Gita, in the Gita it said, I'm not sure if it's the Gita, so I won't quote it, but in the Indian scriptures it says, all of Krishna's soldiers look like Krishna. What does that mean? It means that in our attunement, in our discipleship, and it's the only game in town for truth seekers, for people seeking God. We can't do it without discipleship. And that's why it was the core of Swami's life, and he knew it. He said, I don't care about all the things that I've done in my life, Swamiji said. I just want to be remembered. He was a good disciple. But in that it says everything, because what it's saying was he surrendered his ego to the divine guide that God gave him completely, a good disciple. And we have the opportunity to learn that kind of discipleship from a great disciple to a great master, from Swamiji to Yoganandaji. And maybe, yes, Swami's not with us in the body anymore, but he left us more books and talks than we could get through in a lifetime, truly. And to truly understand, I listened to some of the old talks that he gave now, and I was there when he gave them maybe 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. And when I listen to them now, I realize I didn't have a fraction of the understanding of what he was saying. I liked them, I was inspired by them, but it takes time. It takes time. And Master said of Swamiji said of Master, I wish I could have been a more mature disciple when I was with him. And I think that about Swami. I think of all the silly, unaware things that I did or said, and I think I wish I could have been deeper when I was with you physically. I would have gotten a lot more out of it. But we take what we get, don't we? And so Swami as a disciple, you know, he chose the name Kriyananda, an unusual name, not a common name. But it has so many layers of meaning, as everything Swami did has. Kriya, of course, is the practice of Kriya Yoga that most of us know. Some of you watching perhaps have not been initiated in it. But Kriya is the uplifting of the energy of the ego that's locked in all of our chakras, past memories, past karma, past associations and attachments and desires, lifting them all up and offering them to the divine through a practice. And that was one of the two pillars of Swami's life, that offer through meditation, but more through just consciousness, the constant offering up of the self to the Guru. And then Kriya also means action, to do in the world, to manifest the Guru's will, to represent the Guru in what you do. It doesn't mean you have to be a lecturer. You can be a house cleaner, and you can still be representing the Master's will. You can still be a channel for his energy in the world. I think about, in a way, this is a terrible time. You know, there's that first sentence from Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was about the French Revolution that took place. But you look at all the people, the firefighters on the front line, the healthcare providers on the front line, and despite all the challenges, these people are heroes. What a wonderful opportunity to act in this world, transcending self. The teachers that are going back to school, you see that a number of them have died already. And I'm not getting into politics here, but what I'm talking about is people putting their own lives on the line to help others, and how that is the act of discipleship as well, even though they don't see it perhaps as such. So the practice of Kriya, acting in the world as a channel for the Guru's vibrations, and the understanding of divine friendship in the sense as the expression of discipleship, where you just say, Master, I love you, and I want to offer my life to you. I have no expectations. I have no attachments of anything that you'll give me except your love. That's all I want. And I will keep moving forward until I know that love, until I feel more and more completely that not only are you on my side, but that you are my side, that there's no separation, that you understand every fiber of my being, and I offer it to you willingly and joyfully. And so we can celebrate now. And I think many new wonderful young souls are coming to Ananda. Some of them are helping us to put on this program tonight. And I hope you will carry on the beautiful tradition from the great masters, Babaji, in our line of gurus, Sri Yukteswar, our guru, Swamiji, and keep moving it outward, that pure act of discipleship, of total self-offering, of knowing that there's nothing that you want to keep from God, no shadow, no little error that you keep hidden. He knows it all already, and he cheers you on for every victory you have, and he weeps through your eyes, weeps perhaps when you err, if you hold on to that error. But if you can release it, that's another victory. So this is a celebration of divine love, of divine friendship, of discipleship, and also for me of knowing that Swamiji reaped the fruit of a life given to Guru, and I have no doubt that at some loka, astral, beautiful loka in this cosmos, Master and Swami are dancing and rejoicing as they see all of the children turning their lives more and more towards God and the joy of union with the divine. So now we'll be sharing with you, as I said, 2 videos. The first is very brief. We're launching today a book by Miriam Rogers, and we'll see a little video clip of her in a moment. And she was Swami's nurse for the last 12 years of his life. And she's written a book of stories. We had the joy of reading an advanced copy. The book is called Swamiji, Swami Kriyananda's last years, lessons learned by his nurse. And there are many stories in there that we haven't heard. And this book is available through ebook, through Crystal Clarity, so you can get it that way. They rushed it through to have the ebook. The hard book isn't ready just yet, and it isn't printed just yet. But we'll listen to Miriam share a little bit about how she wrote the book and why, and then we'll just go on to watch the video about the life of Swami that Dave Bingham created. So thank you for being with us.
Hi, great souls. My name is Miriam Rogers, and I had the blessing of being the nurse for Swami Kriyananda for the last 14 years of his life. And now I have just finished writing a book, and Crystal Clarity is publishing this book as an ebook on this Swamiji's spiritual anniversary of discipleship to Paramahansa Yogananda. It is my hope that through this book you will find inspiration, and in these turbulent times be able to find courage and hope by looking at the example that Swamiji gave us of discipleship in service to his Guru. And now I would like to read to you an excerpt from my book. In 2006, we wanted to do something special for Swamiji's 58th spiritual anniversary of discipleship to Master. We transformed the living room at Guru Kripa, his home in Gurgaon, India, into an astral wonderland. Though we invited only staff with a small number of Americans and a large number of Indians, mostly volunteer, the living room was packed. Swamiji read from his book, The Path, about meeting Master on September 12th, more than half a century earlier. His voice would break from time to time with emotion, and by the end there probably wasn't a dry eye in the room. It felt like each of us had come to Master on that auspicious day and been accepted as his disciple. Swamiji's story is our story too. Swamiji invited questions, and there were many. Someone asked about the time Swamiji had asked Master if he would be with us as much after his death as he was then. So Swamiji told us the story, ending with Master's words, "For those who think me near, I will be near." Then a very dear, sweet voice piped up and asked Swamiji, "Will you be with us as much after you're gone?" Swamiji stumbled over his words for a moment, then clearly said, "If I achieve what I hope to achieve, I will be with you, yes, yes."
Swami Kriyananda James Donald Walters was a direct disciple of the great Indian master Paramahansa Yogananda. For 65 years, he dedicated his life to spreading the teachings and the spirit of his great guru. Swamiji was born in Romania in 1926. His parents were American. His mother told him that throughout her pregnancy, she was filled inwardly with joy. Lord, she prayed repeatedly, this first child I give to thee. Romania was young Donald's home until the age of 13. At 9, he was sent away to school in French Switzerland for his health. There he lived and studied for 1.5 years. Thus, before he reached adolescence, he became fluent in 4 languages: English, German, Romanian, and French. From 1937 to 1939, he attended school in England. His family went to America for the summer holidays in 1939. They had just begun their return to Europe when Hitler invaded Poland and World War II began. Thus, they remained in America, settling in the eastern part of the country in Scarsdale, New York. Donald, from the age of 13, attended a succession of schools in the East: Hackley in Tarrytown, New York, Kent School in Kent, Connecticut, Scarsdale High School, Haverford College outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. This unusual variety of schooling, with the diverse experiences it offered, helped to prepare him for a life of reaching out to people of many cultures and countries with the message of his great guru, Paramahansa Yogananda. In September 1948, in New York City, the young truth seeker read Paramahansa Yogananda's great opus, Autobiography of a Yogi. He took almost the next bus across America, a journey of 4 days and 4 nights, to Los Angeles, where the Guru had his headquarters. The first words he addressed to the Master were, "I want to be your disciple." Thus began the thrilling odyssey of young Swamiji's life. He was accepted that very day. From then on, he lived in his Guru's ashram on Mount Washington. Only a year later, his Guru placed him in charge of the other monks. Swamiji was to be given many other responsibilities over the years. Yogananda made him a teacher and minister, and had him initiate others on his behalf. Later, he became the director of center activities worldwide for his Guru's organization, Self-Realization Fellowship, and organized many aspects of the organization's work. In time, he became the first vice president and member of the SRF Board of Directors. His Guru told him, "Your work will be lecturing, editing, and writing." On a number of occasions, Yoganandaji said to him, "You have a great work to do." And after Yogananda's passing, Rajarsi Janakananda, his foremost disciple, told Swamiji, "Master has a great work to do through you," then added, "and he will give you the strength to do it." In 1958, Swamiji went to India, where he lived for the better part of 4 years, teaching and lecturing. He also became widely known for his singing of bhajans in Bengali and Hindi. In northern India especially, he lectured to thousands. He met privately with the Prime Minister, Pandit Nehru, who thought so well of him that he endorsed Swamiji's plan to develop a 25-acre piece of land in the Greenbelt area of New Delhi near Birla Mandir. Here, Nehru is viewing Swamiji's painting of the proposed project. Alas for Swamiji's plans to serve his guru in India. His activities drew disfavor from the leaders of Self-Realization Fellowship in America. His intense desire to make his Guruji known in India seemed to them too original and creative. Fearful lest his activities endangered their own ability to control the work, they ordered Swamiji to return from India in July of 1962. Upon his return, they expelled him from the organization. Swamiji settled thereafter in San Francisco, California, and lived there for several years. He was invited to teach at Dr. Haridas Chowdhury's Cultural Integration Fellowship. Swamiji's love for his guru, however, kept the needle of his mental compass ever pointing toward serving him. Eventually, through classes in yoga and meditation, he began to share Yogananda's teachings in many places in and around San Francisco. His dismissal from organizational involvement proved not the tragedy it had first seemed, but a release, for it made creative activity possible in accordance with the instructions the Master had given to him personally. Swamiji began writing books and composing songs, the lyrics and melodies of which expressed his Guru's philosophy. He wrote in all 150 books, each of them an offering to help deepen people's love for God and for truth. In addition, he composed over 400 pieces of music. He would often say, "If you want to know me, listen to my music."
Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay.
Ever in Swamiji's mind was his Guru's keen interest in world brotherhood communities, for which he had expressed his enthusiasm dramatically at a garden party in 1949.
He started in talking powerfully about communities. And he said, youth must go north, south, east, west, everywhere to spread this ideal of cooperative communities, world brotherhood communities. And he said, I am sowing my thoughts in the ether, and my words shall not die.
In 1968, Swami Kriyananda founded the first Ananda community, fulfilling Yogananda's dream of world brotherhood colonies. The first buildings were geodesic domes, a shape Swamiji chose for its expansive effect on one's consciousness. Through the determined and joyful efforts of Ananda members, the community began to take shape and to grow, coming in time to comprise some 800 acres of land. Here, about 200 member disciples of his Gurudeva now live. A principle Swami established, with which everyone came in time to agree, was, people are more important than things. This means that people's spiritual well-being is more important than projects or anything else. Closely related is the second principle: where there is Dharma, adherence to truth and right action, there is victory. When one makes righteous action his pole star, any resulting hardship will prove in time to be a blessing when embraced with courage, gratitude, non-attachment, and deep faith in God. A spirit of harmony and cooperation has been fundamental to Ananda's success.
The love and compassion that came toward the end of his life was, in some cases, almost startling. There was one story of a young man. Swami had traveled, and he had come back to Gurgaon in northern India, and he was sore. His body didn't easily take to travel. So this young man, who did massages came to help him. And in the course of their conversation, Swami found out that not only did the young man not have a massage table, but he was really struggling for finances. And so Swami not only offered to, but ended up buying him a massage table. And the young man was extremely grateful. And it would be a beautiful story if that were all that it were. But as this young man, he was maybe early 20s, he had a wife and 2 children by that time. As he was leaving the little ashram where Swami was staying, he burst into tears and told one of the staff there, he said, "I grew up as an orphan, and there was a hole in my heart, and what I always missed my entire life was the feeling of the love of a father, and now I have found that." And I don't think Swami did that consciously because this boy was an orphan. I don't think he knew. It was just a constant outpouring of openness so that the divine could work through him and so that Master could work through him.
At present, there exist 6 Ananda communities. 5 of them are in America: Ananda Village in Nevada City, California, and others in Sacramento and Palo Alto, California, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. A 6th community in Assisi, Italy, welcomes guests from throughout Europe, Russia, and farther afield. Some 1,000 people live and serve in these communities.
Swami Kriyananda was always an example of both discipleship and a life given to spirit. But honestly, toward the end of his life, he became, I would describe it as almost transparent. The part that was Kriyananda had gotten so thin that all that really shone through was the love, the compassion, the discipleship to Master, and especially the joy that he had worked on for an entire lifetime. And he modeled that for us. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Ananda's spiritual family includes, in addition, tens of thousands of others all over the world who devotedly follow the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda as brought to us and inspired by Swami Kriyananda. In 2003, in his 78th year, Swami Kriyanandaji felt his Guru's guidance to return to India and take up once again the work he'd had to abandon more than 40 years earlier. At present, there are dynamic Ananda centers in Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, Pune, and Calcutta, as well as a growing monastery in Kandala. Yogananda came to show the underlying unity between the teachings of Jesus and those of Krishna. And so Ananda is equally at home in the West and the East. And yet the devotees in India are showing a particular receptivity to these teachings. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the future for Ananda Sangha seems bright on the Indian subcontinent, land of great saints and masters, and the birthplace of the great guru of Ananda Sangha, Sri Paramahansa Yogananda. Watching Swamiji grow over the years, I first met him when he was in his early 40s, and then till he passed away in his late 80s. And it was such a beautiful thing because every step of the way there was a radiant disciple, a radiant soul. In his early years, dynamic energy and willpower, able to change the world, to give a lecture as brilliant and as expansive as you could ever want to hear. And then his middle years, when he was more writing and putting his thoughts into those great books that he wrote, The New Path and the commentaries on the Gita, and establishing works in Europe and in India. But it was more transforming from him being a teacher to just manifesting things globally. And then at the end of his life, it was like all that was left was the soul. Lecturing was not easy for him, writing was not easy for him, traveling was not easy for him, singing, any of the things, eating, walking. But what was left was the pure essence of who he was. And through all the outward forms, that was the thread that really, I think, inspired me from the very beginning till the very end. And that was the thread of the soul longing for God with every ounce of its being. And finally, one could feel at a certain point the longing and the yearning had been reciprocated, and there was no more striving. There was only resting in the beauty, the peace, the bliss of God. And as he said once, I no longer know where Swami Kriyananda ends and Yogananda starts. It was just one, that bliss of spirit. And to watch that transformation was one of the greatest gifts of my life. And now we invite you to, before we conclude with a prayer for Swami and visualization, to listen to our World Brotherhood Choir from virtual from around the world singing Swami's song, Peace.
Peace gave us the mountains, peace gave us the sky. Nightly when starlight enfolds us, peace is its lullaby. Amen. Amen. Peace gave us
Thank you. Now we'd like to close with a visualization focusing on Swamiji on this day of his spiritual anniversary. So please, you can either look at the beautiful picture of Swami or gaze at his face. Feel him within you. And try to feel the purpose with which he came, to share his life in God with you and me, to help us to see the way out of ego into divine consciousness. Try to feel the strength of his discipleship, infusing your own with determination, with commitment, with unwavering self-offering. Try to feel the example of his discipleship helping you through all tests and trials, that you find the strength within yourself, as he did, to overcome all obstacles before him, to say yes to life, no matter how challenging it might be. Try to feel within yourself, from the example of his discipleship, the positive creative expression of service in everything that you do, large or small. Feel that you are imbuing divine love and consciousness into everything you do. Drawing from his discipleship, try to feel within yourself that you are a divine friend to all, that no one or nothing lies outside the circle of your friendship, your compassion, your desire to help. And finally, feel within yourself and draw from his discipleship devotion, deep devotion for God and Guru, permeating every fiber of your being, until you too become aware that you are only a tiny drop in the great ocean of spirit. Let Swami's discipleship infuse each one of us with the power that brought him step by step to freedom in God. Sit for a moment and try to be receptive to the blessings of his discipleship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.